So, without further ado, the man of the moment, I'd like to welcome Jan Wositzky to perform his show, Thanks for the Welcome. And Jan is a dear friend. His collection of stories, of songs, not unlike Ted, shows his real love of people, his real fascination for their lives. And so we look forward to hearing from you, Jan.
Thank you very much, Anne. And g'day. I'm really pleased to be back here in Mparntwe, Alice Springs tonight. And I thought I'd begin with something I call what I did during the COVID lockdowns. And that's coming from Castlemaine in central Victoria. And not as bad as the city, but we went through, all of that down south horror with those lockdowns. So I was at home on my own most of the time. And I had a lot of time to ruminate, and I was thinking about, in all of the musicians and bands I've played with, etc., that how it was the fiddle player who always got the most attention. And people who played spoons and other things like that, they just looked past you. So during COVID, I learned to play the violin. And that's how I'm going to begin tonight. I'm going to do the Butterfly Concerto, which is a piece of music based around rebirth from butterflies and moths and grubs growing in and then flying away on their gossamer-like wings. So if anybody's come here tonight for a bit of rebirthing, it's going to happen in the first 2 minutes of the show. Okay, the Butterfly Concerto. This is the part where they get born. Any mothers here will know that this is roughly what it's like. Oh, God. Can't trust a Stradivarius anymore, can you? Oh, right. And the rebirth. Oh well, we're back to the spoons. Thank you. If I was 40 years younger, you'd get a lot more of that. Sounds good, thanks, Dars. I came to Australia as a kid when I was 5, and it took me another 40 years till I became an Australian citizen. And the reason being that I wasn't going to swear allegiance to the Queen of Australia until Paul Keating changed it. And then you could become an Australian just by swearing allegiance to the country. And at the ceremony where I became a citizen, we were officiated with a woman called Joy Wandon Murphy, who's a Wurundjeri elder from down south around Melbourne. And to me, who'd been here a long time, and to all of the other people that had been here maybe a year or two when we're just learning to speak English, she gave us all a sprig of gum leaves and welcomed us to Wurundjeri country and said, "This is to ask you to share in the wealth of the country from the roots of the trees right to the tops of the trees." And so I wrote this song in return, and I also sing it tonight as an acknowledgement that I'm here and we're all here with songs and stories on Mparntwe country. Thank you for the welcome to your country. Thank you for the welcome to your land. May we return your grace here in this sacred place. Always was, always will be your land. As we listen to your story in this country, as we face our history in this land, your words from Uluru, straight and strong and true, always was, always will be your land. Some of you shed your blood in defense of your homeland. Some of you cried, dance with us. We danced hand in hand. Some of you were stolen to die in a prison cell. In this old land. In this old land. We came into this country with a Bible and a gun. We believed our coming was the first rising of the sun. We were blind and deaf to hear the story and the song. In this old land, in this old land. Thank you for the welcome to your country. Even though we occupy your land, may we return your grace here in the sacred place. Always was, always will be your land. Thank you for the welcome to your country. Thank you. I'd like to I'd like to thank a couple of people who helped me reversion that song recently. My sister and my brother-in-law Frank and Declan Ferbergillick, who I met down in Castlemaine. And in Castlemaine, where I live and have for the last 25 years or so, is a gold rush town. Began in 1851 with the gold rush to a place called Forest Creek, where they found more gold than anywhere else ever in the world. That's gold on the surface. Which brings up a lot of really interesting bits of history for us that live there today, because the gold diggers that came just completely turned that land into an upturned graveyard, and the Djadjawarrung people, their sacred sites and everything were just wiped. While at the same time, the diggers were standing up for the rights that they never had, and gold was the passport out of poverty. And because 25,000 diggers, as soon as gold was discovered, they rushed up there and camped on the creek. An amazing sight, 25,000 people camped on the creek, all digging it up like mad. The government, Latrobe, decided to put in a gold licence and then to double it, to stop it happening. They did not want the world, the social order, turned upside down. And there at Castlemaine Forest Creek, the diggers organised in protest what they called a monster meeting, and 15,000 diggers turned up. I gave a goodbye kiss to Molly in Melbourne town in May. Kid in a cot, kid in the cradle, another kid on the way. I said I'm off to make our fortune, love, in the hills of Castlemaine, and I'll be back before you even know I've been away. A shilling for a shovel, shilling for a pan. If you don't have a shilling, pick the gold up with your hands. There's plenty here to share, so diggers stake your claim. And we'll be at the monster meeting outside Castlemaine. Now Harry was a barman, Frederick a beak, William a policeman when he came to Forest Creek. Now all of us are diggers following the claim, and we'll be at the monster meeting outside Castlemaine. Yes, we'll be at the monster meeting outside Castlemaine. And there'll be no more, yes sir, no sir, if you please. No more living life down on our knees. We'll all be rich as kings, long will be our reign. We'll be at the monster meeting outside Castlemaine. They met on a hill above the creek. They put a dray on the top of the hill, and from there the speakers spoke to 15,000 assembled diggers. How they did it without a PA, who knows? And they had their flag. This was 3 years before Eureka. The flag was quartered. In one quarter was a pick and shovel, in another a set of scales, in another the emu and the kangaroo, the first time they'd been used as a symbol. And in the last quarter was a bundle of sticks, which came from the Romans, the centurions. And the bundle of sticks had a saying that the diggers said that went with it, which was, the single twig may be bent or broken, but a bundle together yields not, nor breaks. We fly the shovel and the pick for our honest labour, the emu and the kangaroo, we fly for Australia. And if we stick together and say, not I, say us, we'll weigh the gold and weigh our dreams upon the scales of justice. Gather round the flag, boys, gather round the flag. Diggers all, stand around our flag. Upon the scales of justice, each man will be weighed. If the traps are brutal bastards, for cruelty they'll pay. But there's one who stands above them all, La Trobe is his name. Will he be at the monster meeting outside Castlemaine? No, he won't be at the monster meeting outside Castlemaine. Am I too early to try you at singing? No, we won't be at the monster meeting outside Castlemaine. Great. Okay, we might be in for a good night. Well, Molly, dearest Molly, I'll soon be rolling home with a nugget in each hand, ne'er again to roam, and I'm making love to see you, but before I quit my claim, we'll be at the monster meeting outside Castlemaine. Yep, we'll be at the monster meeting outside Castlemaine. Yes, we'll be at the monster meeting outside Castlemaine. Thank you. In the competition, I think that came second or third, but it was written by Frank Jones, who's sitting over here at this long table. How about a big hand for Frank? Frank's my brother-in-law and has come for the trip to Central Australia. $50 or more years ago, when a few of us lads began a band called the Bushwhackers Band, our first roadie was a guy called Roger the roadie. And Roger was shorter than me, but he was stouter than me, with a very curly beard, and he was a landscape gardener. And we used to work for him in the daytime, and because he had the vehicle to carry PAs and gears, he would work for us in the night time. And we were all bulletproof. We were all wild and young and free. And part of that meant we used to all drink a lot of beer. Roger used to drink probably more than the rest of us because he was mixing the sound, and he could sit there having a beer while we were actually on stage working. But back in those days, just about everything we did was lubricated with beer. And Roger and I later lived up at St Andrews outside of Melbourne in a mud brick house. And the general partying continued up there as well. I remember one grand final day, Roger went off to see the grand final. His team, Carlton, was playing Richmond. And when he came home, I said, "Who won, Rog?" And he couldn't remember. And later I shifted to Borroloola. And one day I got a phone call from Roger who said, "I've got to get away from this booze down here." He said, "I'm going to die if I don't get away from here." I said to him, "Well, you're welcome to come up, Rog, but it'll kill you or cure you in a week." I said, "Come up." He said, "I'm on the way," but he never arrived. And a few months later, back down here, down south I mean, I ran into Roger the market, and he said he got as far as the Kinglake pub. And the next thing, he woke up on the Diamond Creek railway station about 2 months later, and he had no idea where he'd been. And then he went west. He had a brother in the west. And he went west to get away from the drinking culture where he lived, in the hopes that he would sort himself out. Fare thee well, My friend, your sister just rang with the news, and I pray as you go, you know I'm ringing for you. A few months later, I got a phone call from Rog just late in the arvo. I was just about to pick up my kids from school, so I said, look, we can talk later, but g'day. And we started talking, and he said, look, I just want to get you and the Bushwhackers and Slim Dusty over to the west for a gig. And I said, what do you want to do that for? And he said, I just want to put on a really big gig. I said, Rog, don't do it. It's too big a show, don't do it. And I said, what's going on? He said, I've sponsored a girl in Africa. I got 20 grand. I want to run a big gig, make a mozza, and send it all to the girl. I said, what's really going on, Rog? And he said, I'm not going to be here for long. I said, what do you mean? You're going to top yourself, or you got a premonition? And he said, I'm just so deeply into the booze, I'll never be able to get off it. He said, I've been in every doss house in the West. He said, the stuff I've been drinking, I wouldn't even like to tell you what it's all about. We talked a bit more, and I said, look, I've got to pick up my kids. I said, you got a heart of gold, just hang in there. Fare thee well, my friend. Your sister just rang with the news, and I pray through my tears you hear me singing for you. With your warm and gentle heart, you travel many lands. Now in the memory of those you loved, your heart it's in safe hands. A couple of days later, I got a call from his sister. I was driving up the highway. She said, you better pull over. She said, Rog went down the shop this morning to get his daily cask of wine. On the way back, he tripped, fell forward, and instead of extending his arms to save himself, he gripped the cask. And he's hit his head. He's in the hospital. He won't live. They're waiting on his daughters to come and switch him off. He donated his organs. The liver wasn't up to much. Apparently his eyes, though, were very good. So many miles, my friend. I hear that you fell by the road. It could have been any of us carrying your load. They say the darkest hour is the one before the dawn. Well, now your darkest hour, my friend, has come and gone. Fare thee well, brother, I'm singing for you. Fare thee well, my friend, I'm singing for you. I'm gonna miss you, my friend. This song of my heart, it's for you. When you told me the end was near, wish I'd said that I loved you. But now your soul has flown home from booze and strife. May you know your friends loved you well throughout your life. Fare thee well, brother, I'm singing for you. Fare thee well, my friend, I'm singing for you. He was duly cremated in the West, and they brought the ashes back and placed them on the bar of the St Andrews Hotel where we had a wake. The next morning I was having a cup of coffee with one of Roger's daughters, and she told me she'd gone west to try to pull him out of it, but that was impossible. And she told me that over in the west, she said, there's a snake called a dugite. And the way the dugite operates, it bites you, sinks in its fangs, and then sucks in your blood, mixes it with the poison, and then injects the cocktail back into you. She said Roger got up one night to have a piss out the backyard under the washing line, and midstream a dugite rose and bit him on the stomach, and the dugite died. Fare thee well, brother, I'm singing for you. Fare thee well, my friend, I'm singing for you. Thank you. And then I came up here. What brought me up here, amongst other things, was hearing the Territory Identity, Bill Harney on the radio. But more of that later. I headed up here and immediately I got lost. Lost in that top end country where it's just savanna grass, tall grass after the wet season, before the knock-em-down winds have come and taken that away. And I crossed this river thinking I'd go fishing and went down the track and got completely lost. And it started to get dark, and you come to that survival equation where, shall I keep driving and run out of petrol, or should I stop? And I was just thinking this one through when I saw a campfire. So I drove up to this campfire, and I could see that there was two things. There was a Land Rover there with snow skis on the roof, on the pack rack, and there was a very big bloke sitting beside the campfire. So I pulled up, I got out, I yelled out, "Cooey!" as if he hadn't seen me arrive. And he stood up and he said, "Guten Abend." I said, "I'm lost. Do you know the way out of here?" "No, I too am lost. Why not you to share the campfire with me for tonight?" I said, "No, I'm lost. I have to get back," and people are waiting on me. And he said, "I have wine. I have sausage. You will not find your way. You will stay with me tonight." So I settled in with this guy, and his name was Hans. And it turned out that Hans was most interested in snakes. He said, "What snakes do you have in this country?" And I was continuing to follow this fellow Bill Harney, and I read in one of his books that up north, you've got to be an expert. He said he based it on the idea from the Bible that in the valley of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And so I said to Hans, "Yeah, well, up round here, you get taipans and you get death adders and you get hoop snakes." And he said, "Was ist das Hupschneck?" I said, "Well, the full adult male is about 7 foot long. And what it does, it bites its tail in its mouth and it rolls along like a bicycle wheel right along the ridges. But when it sees prey, like you or I down in the valley, down it comes, let's go, and like a spear, right into your jugular." And he said, "This I do not believe." I said, "You can trust me. I'm telling the truth. You can trust me. I'm an Australian." He said, "Well, if I can trust you, where can I get the taipan?" It turns out that if you can get a live taipan into Germany, it's worth about $2,000. So, once again, the expert, I said, well, when we get out of here tomorrow, go to the nearest pub up here, tell the barman you'll pay $100 for a taipan. Before you know what, you'll have half a dozen blokes knocking on your door saying, hey, you want to buy a taipan, mate? He said, is this true? I said, I'm an Australian. And then we talked about everything else travellers talk about, which is mainly where you've been and where you're going. And we were both leaving on the same plane from Darwin to Denpasar in a little time away. And so we agreed to meet up at the Hotel Darwin the night before the departure. So I went up to his hotel and, good day, my friend from the wilderness. I said, g'day, mate. Would you like a whiskey? Ah, thanks very much. I'll have a whiskey. And he got me a whiskey. And then the cashier called him and he had to go and attend to his bill or something. And so he left me there. And I like my whiskey with ice. And so I went to the fridge. And there, 6 deadly taipans curling around each other with very torpid looks in their eyes. And I shut the fridge door and had my whiskey neat, and he comes back, would you like another whiskey? I said, yes, thanks. Hans, I'd love another whiskey, but I'll have ice this time. And he went stock still. He just looked at me, and he said, you said you are a man of your word. I said, yes, I know I did. He said, you must not tell about the taipans. I said, but for God's sake, how are you going to get them through customs? They're going to look in your luggage. And he said, I am not going to carry them in my luggage. Do you think I am stupid? And I did. But he said then, I will show you. And I said, so how are you going to carry them? And he said, I am going to carry them in my trousers. I said, in your trousers? He said, yes. Here, I will show you. He opened the fridge, took out one very long taipan, undid his belt, just dangled it down the front and curled the head around his Y fronts, did up his belt and said, there. No one would notice. I said, there's 6 of them, 3 in each leg. Here. I said, no, just put that bloody thing away and get me some ice while you're at it. And he said, first you must promise you will not tell about the taipans. I said, but if one of them wakes up on the plane, you're dead. They will not wake up. The flight from Darwin to Denpasar, 1 hour, 40 minutes. They will sleep for maybe 5 hours. Now you promise? I said, I promise. And the next morning in the customs hall, I saw him. He had those German trousers, you know, they tuck the cuffs into the socks, and he was walking through the customs hall. And, as luck would have it, I was allocated the seat next to Hans. And he wouldn't talk to me. He was pretending he didn't know me. And remember I said he was a really big man? His legs were pressing against mine. We taxied down the runway. I imagined like 6 sets of fangs coming out of his pads into mine. But I'm a man of my word, and I sat there in silence until 10 minutes out of Darwin, suddenly Hans... I thought, I'm going to have to call the hostess. And I went, and he said, no, it is nothing, something I ate. And he clambered over me, went down into the toilet, and 10 minutes he came back, white as a sheet. And halfway back up the aisle, he collapsed onto the floor, and the hostesses rushed to help him. I thought, I'm going to have to break my word. I said, get out of there, get him out, don't touch him. Yeah, he's got 6 Australian deadly live taipans in his trousers. They said, what? I said, he's got 6 taipans in his trousers. He said, you gave me your word. I said, I know I did, but goddamn, those snakes are going to be all over this plane in a minute and you'll be bitten. Everybody will be bitten. By this time, they'd called the captain up. He says, gentlemen, what appears to be the problem? And trying to appear as sane as I could, I explained that this man had 6 deadly taipans in his trousers. Is this true? Said the captain. Hunt stood up, undid his pants, nothing. Just hairy legs and grey underwear. I said, he's put them in the toilet. They're in the toilet. They looked in the toilet, nothing. I said, he's flushed them down the toilet. But they couldn't find anything down there. The captain said, gentlemen, just return to your seats. We're returning to Darwin. So, back in our seats, what did you do with them? He wouldn't speak to me. What did you do with them? Where are they? He wouldn't speak to me until we finally got off at Darwin. We actually got onto the tarmac and walking across the tarmac, and he said, never again will I trust an Australian. And I used to tell audiences which airline it was that this happened on, but the last time I did, a Qantas executive was coming out of the crowd threatening to sue me. But I often wondered where those taipans got to, and then a few weeks later, on a Qantas flight from Melbourne to Perth, a young boy got bitten by a snake, and it was taipan venom. I don't know, you make up your own mind. I'm not real sure. But that's the tale of the deadly taipans. And then I got lost again. And this time I got lost properly and finished up in Borroloola. And it was my friend Ted Egan who said, if you get to Borroloola, try to find Musso. And he was my mate at Borroloola, said Ted. But Musso was nowhere to be found at that point of time. I got to know him later. So, to meet people, went down to the school and said, do you want a show for the kids? And in that show sang this song, which was something I recorded when I was in the Bushwhackers. Oh, look, stand tall, Annie, see the world grow small, Annie. And when they fall, Annie, where will we be? Winter has come, Annie, no strength in the sun, Annie. And when it's gone, Annie, where will we be? When all those colours have faded, when old Jack comes to call, don't tell him, no, tell him maybe, dear Annie, God bless us all, dear Annie, God bless us all. It was written by Ronnie Lane and Eric Clapton, and they said that they wrote it when they lived in this farm in Wales. And over the next valley, there was a woman who they said was, like to them, a spiritual grandmother. And a Borroloola schoolteacher, John Bradley, could speak Yanua, which was one of the three local language, and he translated it. And he also said it was about a spiritual grandmother whose name was Annie. Kandaralari, Annie, yumbul yumbul manta, Boachi Annie. Kanda Wingala, Annie, Nanti Mutu. Ramardo Bara, Annie, Chanda Bulamanji, Boachi Annie. Kanda Wingala, Annie, Nanti Wutu. Waipara Waringano, Nyamanachi Waipara, Bani wingaya yuro juro, Annie non carnargo, Kanye non carnargo. Hear the children, they call, Annie, every leaf must fall, Annie. God bless us all, Annie, wherever we'll be. Leonardo Biddy, watch by her Annie, Wada da Jimu, Annie. Palakinyala, Annie, Nanti Wutu, wherever we'll be. Kalu Arila, wherever we'll be. Thank you. And I learned that by going and offering some music down at the school, as anybody that goes with a gift, you turn yourself from a tourist into a traveller. And so people were saying, hey, you want to come down the river for a swim? Isn't there crocodiles down there? No, but yes, there are, but we know exactly where to go. And then, do I need the mic, Darcy? Yeah. And then they said, you want to come and see the dance tonight? And went down to the river side where most nights of the week everybody got together and danced a dance they called the Nudgee dance. And they said it was mermaids, the translation of Nudgee, but I later learned that it meant spirit women. And I also learned that this dance came about during World War II, when Bill Harney again, as a patrol officer, wrote how the mailman, the policeman in Borroloola, and the cattle station owners on the Barkly Tablelands organised what Bill Harney called blackbirding, and all of these people that I was meeting doing the dance, who were old people now, as young people, were blackbirded up to the Barkly Tablelands to work on the cattle stations up there. And they tried to get away. They told me they'd run away, but they'd be chased down with men on horses and stock whips and brought back in to work, except for two people, Alma and Jerry, husband and wife. And they managed to escape, and they were out bush around the Barkly Tablelands for a fair while. And when they came back, they each had a really substantial and important dance and song. And I said to them, so how did you compose it? And they said, no, we found it, which was an interesting concept at that time. And the women's one was called Nudgee, and this was the one they used to dance most nights of the week as a social dance. But it told the story of a long journey of spirit women, they said to me, from round about Lake Amadeus right up to the Gulf of Carpentaria. And later, I wrote this song describing their dance. Tides rise and fall, rivers to sea, white stars fall, mermaids call, Borroloola Gulf country. Men fall on their knee whenever they see the mermaid Nudgee. She held in her hand the story of her land, her footprints in the sand told a tale of travel and romance. To the big dry plain the mermaids came, breaking hearts wherever they danced. By the moon and the sea, the pandanus tree, the men quivered in a trance. Her song was sung when the world begun. Now her song is sung as they dance in the electric light, and they hide their souls in the water holes. Only the sunrise knows where the sunset goes, and the shades travel to the light. Tides rise and fall, rivers to sea, white stars fall, mermaids call. Borroloola Gulf Country, men fall on their knee whenever they see the mermaid Nariji, the mermaid Nariji. Thank you. And finally, Darwin. A postcard from hell in October by Andrew Macmillan. Greetings from Sweat City. The page is already stained. Like Darwin, I sprawl in the heat, bathe in humidity, ooze toxins from every pore. I sigh desperate pleas of relief. The heat, it closes like an oven door. The air is soggy as a bath towel. Fans hover from ceilings like plummeting choppers in a jet stream wash of wind. Is it the heat that's driving me crazy? Or the buffeting of a fan-driven gale? Orioles headbutt the windows of a morning, clonk, clonk, clonking in the trees that hang limp as rags. My sheets, they're stained with sweat. I have no desire to share my bed, only to stand beneath a cold shower and scan the skies for rain. Sometimes it hangs in grey curtains, strung from massive billowing clouds in the distance, but rarely does it break through the Berrymar line. Magpie geese in the oval honk like a traffic jamming Bangkok. Screeching drunk lorikeets party hard, toppling out of their umbrella trees, off their fermented heads on the juice. The bloke reading the weather comes on with a tease. He stands poker-faced. He tells stories as tall as thunderheads. And for Darwin, there's the possibility of an overnight shower about what? About 6 weeks away, I reckon. In the paper, I look at the weather map. It's accompanied by a dozen telephone numbers for airlines out of here. But anyone with a few bucks and a bit of sense has already taken that option, bailed out of town in September, climbed aboard a freeze-dried aeroplane and fled to the cooler climes of the south. Oh, bring on the monsoons. I need to hunker down in a world of thunder and lightning and pouring, driving rain amid belching frogs and gluttonous geckos as palm trees bend in the wind and swimming pools fill with debris. Lordy, such memories, such hopes, such anticipation. Armour-plated spiders rumble across the floor. I take them out with a dictionary. At night, we sit on verandas. We scan the skies for rain. The chinkle of ice in the gin, the bark of geckos on the wall, the ice melts like that. Cigarette papers, concertina out of packets. We talk about the heat. We reminisce about the New Year's wet of 91. And newcomers, sucked into their first build-up, express desires to experience a cyclone. The old hands shake our heads, and we mutter about the naive stupidity of anyone wishing to face such a force. We nibble soggy chips, drink too much cask wine, argue deep and drunk into these stinking nights, squabbling at the table like fruit bats, squawking in the darkness. Each creature so gorged on juice, it can't even make it to the telegraph wires. The bats flee, struggle across the sky, jerking across the misty face of a blue moon in October. The build-up mentality is setting in, and no one is safe. No one is immune, and no one is innocent. Rope heads and nose pegs, they dance in the first teasing showers. Drivers get impatient. Get off the road, you clown. Disorders of the flesh bloat under cruel fluorescent lights. The pubs are so hot, there's brawls on the street. The nightclubs are so crowded, the footpaths are littered with beer cans, and relationships so fragile, they tear at the drop of a stranger's condom. There's mango madness at work here, a simmering level of violence that's out of control. Your nerves stretch, your blood boils, your beer, it gets too warm to drink. Abusive telephone calls at 3 o'clock in the morning, calls of apology 13 hours later. Girls too drunk to drive, demanding to share your bed. This town gets so sick at this time of the year, it ought to be quarantined and shut down. Break out the straitjackets and the sedatives. Impose martial law. Put Bing Crosby and the Seekers on the radio. Everyone's contaminated and going to hell. And still, it's only October. P.S. Send rain. Thank you. By the late Andrew McMillan. After this song, we're going to have 20 minutes and then come back for the second half, where I'll be joined for a couple of items by Bill Davis and Ted Egan. And this, back down this way. In 1985, I went to the Handback of the Rock, and with a musical friend that came with me, Tony Hargraves, this was our memento of a song. Desert tonight and the stars are bright, rolling down to the rock, swagging the sand in the red, red land, rolling down to the rock. In the charter, took the charter, Governor General too. White fella law, black fella law, rolling down the road to Uluru. RAAF governor comes flying into the rock. Under the sun he gets the job done, handing over the rock. They signed a deed and a big stampede, the press ran down the choir. The women knocked from the mound, hardly a sound, and the paper boys from Sydney earned their hire. You might climb as rock, but you don't claim Uluru. Pindajara, Yugnajara belong to Uluru. During the ceremony, a light aircraft flew around and around above the ceremony ground, trailing a sign that said, "Ayers Rock for all Australians." 2-litre mines in 10-gallon hats are flying around in the sky. They can fly till they rust because down in the dust they're holding the title on high. She's bigger than us all, makes you feel small. Take a look if you think it's not true. If you don't want to roam, hang at home and play pin the tourist on top of Uluru. You might have climbed Ayers Rock, but you don't climb Uluru. Pindajara, Yugnajara belong to Uluru. Under floodlight they danced, and tonight stepping to the clapping boomerang, beating the ground and beating the ground and beating the boomerang. Up comes the bloke, rolls the smoke, held the book in his hand. He said the book was new, must be true, that a fella called Captain Cook discovered this land. You might have climbed Ayers Rock, but you don't climb Uluru. Pindajara, Yugnajara belong to Uluru. Yes, I must admit that I've climbed Ayers Rock too. Pindajara, Yugnajara belong to Uluru. Desert tonight and the stars are bright and we're rolling down to the rock. Thank you. See you in 20 minutes. Hello and greetings again. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the friends of Araluen for putting on the show here tonight. Thank them all very, very much. I don't know them all personally, but I'd especially like to thank Ann Davis, who suggested this, and who has put it all together. Every detail, nothing left unturned. Thank you, Ann, so much. And would you please welcome Bill Davis to play the piano.
Thank you. I'm making a recording of this show.
On your
Everybody,
iPhone.
this is the clapometer. If you don't agree with it, you get a clap. No. Okay.
We're going to have someone on stage soon who did have the clap. Anyway.
A round of applause.
Thanks, Bill. Keep it coming. When I lived in Melbourne, I was travelling up Scotsman Street in North Fitzroy, for the people who might know that address, and there was a piece of graffiti, 3 words, on a corrugated iron fence. And with the help of one of the great musicians I've ever played with, Louis McManus, we put together this song based on those 3 words. With 1, 2, 3, 4. Sack the jack, we don't want you. Sack the jack, you're blue blood too. Sack the jack, it's time for you to go. We don't want a foreign queen. Empire is an old has-been. Southern stars are shining in our soul. And we don't want the jack up our pole. Now, I was remarking how quiet it was in the first half, and I'm wanting to change that now. At least the last line, with the we don't want the jack up our pole. Time to sing, last chance. We don't want the jack up our pole. How come I knew what the song was all about as soon as I saw these 3 words on the fence, was that when I was 12 and a good boy scout, I was chosen to go on behalf of the 1st Ferny Creek Scout Troop to welcome the Queen to Melbourne. 1963, I was 12. I was the only one chosen from 1st Ferny Creek, and they groomed me. The garter tabs had to be just right. The woggle that you held your scarf together had to be polished to an extreme. Your hat had to be starched. Straight lines, really sharp, creases on your hat, whatever they call them. Everything pressed and polished, teeth cleaned. And off I went on this hot Saturday morning down to the banks of the Yarra to welcome the Queen, only to find that I was one of about 5,000 young boys who'd been pulled in to welcome the Queen. And not only that, I was down the back. And all I saw of the Queen was her hat going along the front row. And it just looked like, from where I was, a bunch of hydrangeas. It could have been a bunch of hydrangeas that they were just taking right along the front. They didn't give us a cup of tea. They didn't even give us a glass of water all day in the sun. And although I didn't understand this word, on that day, age 12, I became a Republican. Okay.
Sag the Jack. Sag the Jack.
We're going to get him to sing with us, Bill. Okay. With the 1, 2, here we go. Sack the Jack, we don't want you. Sack the Jack, your blue blood too. Sack the Jack, it's time for you to go. We don't want a foreign queen. Empire's an old has-been. Southern stars are shining in our soul. And we don't want the Jack up our pole. That's the part you got to sing with, passion. Well, everywhere the Empire sailed with Bible, flag and gun, they dumped their convicts, rabbits, lords and pox. Hoisted that red, white and blue and cut out all the fun and made the locals walk around in socks. Here we go. Sack the Jack, we don't want you. Sack the Jack, your blue blood too. Sack the Jack, it's time for you to go. We don't want a foreign queen. Empire is an old has-been. Southern stars are shining in our soul. And we don't want a Jack up our pole. Well, once we were a colony ruled by drunken lords, where every blow was struck for God and King. But now we eat McDonald's and we drive around in Fords. So come along, you vassals, let's all sing. Hey, sack the Jack, we don't want you. Sack the Jack, your blue blood too. Sack the Jack, it's time for you to go. We don't want a foreign queen. Empire is an old has-been. Southern stars are shining in our soul. And we don't want a Jack up our pole. Well, I remember when I sang this for the Royal Command performance. It went down pretty well. And afterwards, you know how they line all of the stars up backstage to meet the royals. You always see that part on television. Well, there I was with all my mates like Johnny Farnham and all that mob. And this time, the whole lot of them were here. There was Princess Anne, and there was Princess Margaret, and there was Charles. And the Queen was here, but I said she wasn't welcome after she stood me up in 1963. But they were coming down the line there talking to everybody, and I was waiting. And I was looking at them, and I thought, you know, the media have been quite cruel to them. I thought, they have got big jaws, and they've all got long teeth, but they don't look like horses, like everybody in the media says. So when they came up to me, I thought I'd be nice. And the conversation got going, but it soon petered out. And so just to keep the conversation going, I said, how many times have you been to Australia? And they went, Rule Britannia, marmalade and jam, 5 Chinese crackers up your asshole, bang, 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 bang. Now they sang that. I thought, what a sense of humour. They said, yeah, get it, people to sing that everywhere you go. Okay, folks? 2, 3, 4, with Rule Britannia, marmalade and jam, 5 Chinese crackers up your asshole, bang, 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 bang. I said to them, I think I've got another version of that you might take an interest in. I said it goes, Rule Britannia, Britannia rules the waves. Everywhere we go there shall be slaves. They weren't that keen on that one. So I said, here, let's try another one. This one goes, Terra nullius, Terra nullius is dead. Terra nullius is dead. They said they didn't know what I was talking about. Maybe you do. Maybe you can sing this one. Terra nullius, Terra nullius is dead. Terra nullius is dead. Hey, stack the jack, we don't want you. Stack the jack, your blue blood too. Stack the jack, it's time for you to go. We don't want a foreign queen. Empire is an old has been. Southern stars are shining in our soul. And we don't want a jack up our pole. While some of you right here might think the jack's all right, hankering for a touch of class. But show me the Union Jack and I will with delight tear it up and stick it in your 5 Chinese crackers up your asshole, bang, 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 bang. Hey, sack the jack, we don't want you. Sack the jack, your blue blood too. Sack the jack, it's time for you to go. We don't want a foreign queen. Empire's an old has been. Southern stars are shining in our soul. And we don't want a jack up our pole. Last line, and we don't want a jack up our pole. Bill Davis on the piano, thank you. I would now like to invite Ted Egan to come up and sing. I've invited Ted up to sing the wonderful song he wrote right back in 1966, the Goodingy Blues.
I'll need a lift up
Yep.
and a push. Like a rugby. Here we go. Here we go. Whoops.
Ted Egan, ladies and gentlemen. And here's the sticks. Before Ted, thank you. Before Ted introduces it, his song, I'd like to do an introduction to the whole damn thing. This here, you know, the British Empire, wherever they went, hoisted the flag, said, We own the joint. But that's not the way it worked in Victoria. A fellow called John Batman came across Bass Strait, sailed up to where Northcote now is, and on the banks of the Mary Creek, he produced this.
What is it?
This. It's a land deal. And it was like a pro forma parchment, and he brought it along, and according to this, John Batman buys all of the land from Melbourne right up to about Warburton, and then in the big arc right down to Torquay, including all of Melbourne, everything in between Geelong and the Bellarine Peninsula. For 20 pairs of blankets, 30 tomahawks, 100 knives, 15 pair of scissors, 30 looking glasses, 200 handkerchiefs, 100 pounds of flour, and 6 shirts. What a deal. And he was a clever bastard. He grew up with Aboriginal kids around Parramatta, but he knew, I think, something of Aboriginal ceremony. And so this land deal was called a deed of enfoffment. And by it, old English law, but still extant at the time, the deal is sealed when the seller gives the buyer a handful of soil. And now we're going to have a blackout. And the blackout works like this. You put your hands over your eyes and shut your eyes. Yeah, I'm serious. A blackout. You do this. Okay? You're not going to. Or you're going to miss out on the surprise.
Me personally.
Yeah. Okay. Do not open your eyes again until you hear me say, I am.
Australian.
I am born of convict seed. You can open your eyes. I am shot of convict seed. I am born of convict loins. I am the greatest landowner in the world. Land, land, land as far as the eye can see, like a virgin waiting for the plough, all for the payment of 20 pairs of blankets, 30 tomahawks, 100 knives, 50 pair of scissors, 30 looking glasses, 200 handkerchiefs, 100 pounds of flour, and 6 shirts, and similar goods in rental each year for land, land, land. 500,000 acres of land, according to the deed. And John Batman got the 8 Wurundjeri men who signed here to give him a handful of soil, which he said therefore meant that they understood that they were selling him their land. Cut to 1975. Gough Whitlam was on the way to Dagaragu to hand the land back to the Gurindji people, and his advisor, Nugget Coombs, said, you know, they're not going to want a boring speech. What do you suggest? And so Nugget Coombs told him about Batman's swindling handful of soil. And so they decided to reverse the swindle with that handful of sand poured into the hands of Vincent Lingiari. And now, back to the beginning of it all, 1966, with Ted and the Gurindji Blues.
Thank you.
And introduce them and talk about it as you like to.
It's a song that I wrote. Those of you who dabble in song composition, the best time is 3 a.m. And on the 9th of September 1969, I wrote the song, The Gurindji Blues, because I'd heard a Minister of the Crown say, in respect to this walk-off, if these Gurindji want some land, why don't they do what any decent Australian would do? Why don't they save their money and buy some land? And I thought, hang on, shithead. You weren't there in 1953 at the Wayfield races. I was, when every Gurindji stockman, after their families had worked for the white station owners for 80 years, each one was lined up and given a £5 note the first time any of them had ever touched money in their lives. And so this is the song that was the outcome. I've always been disappointed that I've never been asked to deliver the Vincent Lingiari lecture, because a lot of people who do the lecture have never heard of him, but I thought I knew a lot about it until I read the book written called A Handful of Sand, I guess most of you know, written by Charlie Ward, and it's a beautiful book. He's the son of Russell Ward, the Australian legend, and a beautiful book, but I do know this, that this is the song that I composed on that night. Poor bugger me, Geringy, me been set on this country, long time before the Lord Vestey, all about land belonging to we, oh, poor bugger me, Geringy. Poor bugger me, Geringy, we been to long time work, no wages, we work for the good old Lord Vestey, little bit flour, sugar and tea for the Geringy from Lord Vestey, oh poor bugger me. Poor bugger me, Geringy, man called Vincent Lingiari, talk long all about Geringy, Dago Rago place for we, for we, Geringy. But poor bugger black fella Geringy, government boss him talk long way, build you house with electricity, but at Wave Hill, for can't you see, Waddy Creek belonged to Lord Vestey. Oh, poor bugger me. Poor bugger me, Geringy, up come Mr. Brainhardy, up skull too and talk long way, give it and long Geringy, build him house and plant him tree, long a Waddy Creek for Geringy. Oh, bugger black fella Geringy, government law him talk long way, can't give it land long black fella see, only spoil him Geringy, oh poor bugger me, Geringy. Poor bugger me, Geringy, Peter Nixon talk long way, buy you on land Geringy, buy him back from the Lord Vestey, oh poor bugger me, Geringy. But poor bugger black fella Geringy, suppose we buy him back country, what you reckon proper fee? Might be plough, sugar and tea from the Geringy to Lord Vestey, oh poor bugger me. Oh, Witchettys Araluen Mparntwe, we are now you lawyer and sorry my country Geringy. Woo! Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you lower me down?
Yeah. We can. Sprinkle help us. I'll pull this back.
Thank you.
Big hand for Ted. Thank you. That's set list.
Thanks, Ted. Hey, that's a pretty... Hey, is anybody slightly bemused or alarmed about the what yarn's got on his boot?
Oh,
Uh-huh.
decoration.
There used to be a trick when I was a kid, yarn, where you got the toilet paper and you stuck it on somebody's pants.
And then what?
Well, it was just a shame job, you know. Anyway. Yarn's given me the chance to sing one of my songs. It's about fire. Before the windmills started turning, before the fence line met the sky, and the drover took his journey from Murraytown to Narrabri. For we try to find the ocean, then abandoned men and horses to the stony ground and the raging sun. Fire burned this land. Fire burned this land. Like carving night bushfire traced up the valley, spit roasted the sand. Fire burned this land. Before the engines started roaring, we drove the world on steam, and these boots we went to war in was leather from the Kimberley. Before the gold was a raging fever, in every digger's mind. We tore up the hills and the valleys. Hoes was all we left behind. Fire burned this land. Fire burned this land. Like carving night bushfire traced up the valley, spit roasted the sand. Fire burned this land. Seven sisters in position, out behind the Milky Way. Sun has made decision. It's time to start another day. The history before we came along. Painted pictures of the future that we would have when they were gone. Fire in the sky, fire in the sky. Old Galaxy River, unwinding forever for millions of miles. Fire in the sky. Fire burned this land.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Bill Davis. I mentioned earlier the character Bill Harney, whose voice on the radio was one reason that brought me up here many times. And it was happened that I just got up on this morning when my girlfriend had got up and gone out before me but left the radio on, and there was this voice. Oh, I remember back to the time when I was born. It was round about 1895 and Charters Towers, and me old man got the gold bug, and he rushed away over to Western Australia, and that left me mother to maintain us, and she used to make doughboys in the kerosene tin, and she would crochet overnight, and then my sister Beattie and I in the morning we'd run around the streets and we'd sell it. And I was just arrested by this voice, just made a cup of tea and listened, and I rang the ABC and I said, can I speak to that gentleman when he's finished, when he's off air? And they said, no, he died in 1962. And this is a recording. So I kept on listening. And then when I was about 10 years old, a man, he came to my mother and he said he could give me work, and he could give me a bit of tucker, but he took it away from my mother. She had trouble feeding us all, and my old man, he'd run away over to Western Australia and chasing the gold. And so off I went with this woodcutter, and my job was to boil a billy, and I had to keep the fire going. And then one time he come back and he found that the fire was gone out, and he gave me a whipping. He whipped me, and I run away, and I jumped the train out to Western Queensland, and my sister was out there, and Beattie, and she said, look, just put him on the train, I'll pay for him when he gets out here. And so Bill Harney was out there working barefoot and penniless, as he put it, as about a 14-year-old boy, until later he and a mate called Andy were round the Cloncurry area, and they went away to the war. Well, it was undulating country, and there was a bit of timber here and there, and there was a few billy bongs about the place. And I'll never forget the day the mailman come along. He had a buggy, and he told us that war had been declared. He said there's a big war on, and Britain and Germany, they're fighting one another, and we didn't know what he was talking about. And the boss reckons, the British Navy, they'll blow them out of the sea. It'll be over in a fortnight. And so we just got back working, and after the job finished, they give us a bit of tucker, and we go on to the next place. And finally, Andy and I, that was me mate, we got around to Burketown, and boy, was it rough when we was there, and we had no money, and we were in the real doldrums, and then a crocodile pinched one of our horses. It dragged it into the river and it ate it, and we were there in the doldrums, and a bloke come along and he said, how's the war going? And we said, what do you mean war? And he says, you remember the war that was on when we was back in the old Cloncurry? And I said, blimey, there was a war on, come to think of it. What's it still on there? And, too right, it is, he said there. He said, we said we thought it'd be over in a fortnight. And, oh, no, he said, these Germans, they're tough guys. He said, why don't you go to the war? And we said, what do they want us? And he said, too right, they do. And we said, well, how do you get to it? And he said, well, you go into town there and you see the doctor, and if you're fit, they take you away to the war. And, Andy thought it'd be a good idea to get away from the horses. They had cattle ticks and everything like that. And so when we went and we saw the doctor, and he looked us up and down and said, you're young and you're fit, I'll put you in the Light Horse Brigade. And we said, oh, no, thanks very much. We've had enough of horses. What else have you got? And he said, well, I can put you in the infantry. Well, too right. And boy, was we happy. Come the time that we had to leave from Burketown, and we're on the boat there, and they give us, everybody was having a drink, but I didn't drink, so I had a cup of tea, and they put tea with milk in it, and they put us up in a hotel in a bed with sheets, and I'd never slept in a bed with sheets in my life, and so as we were leaving, they all sang that old song, the one that goes, We don't want to lose you, but we think you ought to go. Something like that. And off we were there, and we got on the outside once we were past the mangroves there in the old Nicholson River, and the sea was rocking up and down, and there we were, and all of those cakes they gave me, and all of the tea had started to come up in me, and I thought, blimey, I'm out of here. I said to my mate Andy, when we get round to Townsville, I'm getting off. And he said, you can't. I said, what do you mean I can't? He said, well, if you want to run away now, they'll shoot you. I said, they shoot me? He said, you will. You've enlisted now, and if they desert, they might just shoot you. And I thought, blimey, what I got myself into here. And we picked up blokes in Townsville, and then we picked up more over near Perth. And finally we got over there to France, and that's when I saw the whole thing of war. That's when it started, and I saw my first action. And there was our band. They were a brass band, and they had about 60 instruments, and they were all shined up there, and they was practising up behind one of them barns that they have up behind the estaminet, and they was practising away there, and the German, he must have spotted them from one of their observation balloons, and he directed fire onto them, and it killed quite a lot of them, and there we were in the night burying these blokes. It took out about 60 of them, and that was my first experience of the war. And I remember my first time into action. It was black as ink. You didn't know anything. And there we were creeping up, and we had our little Tommy gun. And then the Germans, they were bombarding with this great big Navy gun they had. It was a terrific thing. And of course, over comes a big shell, and over went half of our blokes. And, then the officer, he yells out, charge. Of course, I was charging one way, and another bloke was charging another way. And, it's like a mob of chooks. When you throw a kerosene tin amongst a mob of chooks, everybody was in all directions at once, and this was us, the great charge, and back on the cattle station, we'd make up our own mind what we'd do, but here you were just a cog in the machine, and fear was a funny thing. I discovered that there was sort of three kinds of fear in the line. There was one bloke, he was a sort of laughing fear, and he was sort of bordering between shell shock and normal stability, and then there was the crying bloke, if a bloke cried, well, when he was frightened, he was just relieving himself. And funny thing, when he was wanted, he was always there. But I was a sort of funny kind of fear. I was a sleeping fear. If I got very frightened, I'd just fall asleep, kind of nature, poor old coot, knock him out. And one time they were bombarding with this great big gun they had, and I got very frightened. I just curled up in this little alcove there nearby in the trench, and I fell asleep. And suddenly I woke up, and there was a complete darkness and a total silence, and I felt around a bit, and suddenly I realised that I'd been buried alive, and I started yelling, and I was screaming, and then I heard this little noise there up above. They're going dump, 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 and I yelled some more, and then I heard a voice that said, hello, there's somebody down there, and presently they came down, and they put their hand through, and they pulled me up, and they're going, where is it? Where is it? And I'm saying, what are you talking about? And they said, where's that jar of rum that was down there before? And I looked over, and my mates that was drinking the rum, they was dead. The trench had just folded right in on their faces that had killed them. And so I said, well, look, they was drinking it here when I went to sleep. And right on, mates, they said, out of our way, pulled me out the way, and they started drinking the rum. And I thought, well, it's a fine thing they knew that rum was down there, because if they didn't, I'd still be down there today. And I was there for 3 years, and finally the war was coming to an end, and that's when I saw the whole thing of war. Here was one time there was this, all the women folk were looking for the men that were dead lying in the fields, and all their animals were slaughtered, and I saw one thing, a most terrible thing. There was a bloke, a German, he come towards me and he had his jaw shot away, and he had another bloke on, he was carrying him on his back, and he had a broken leg, and they came up to me and they sat down and they saluted me. I'd never been saluted by anybody in all my life, and they saluted me, and then they pulled out this coffee and cognac that they had, and they gave me some coffee and cognac, and I had some and they had some, and they showed me the pictures of their wives and all of their children and the farms where they came from, and I thought, blimey, what's it all about? What's it all about? Here's the defeated people, and they're going back to where their currency is broken down, and there's just disorganisation. That's a terrible thing, that. And so when I got off in Melbourne, we come home, I got off straight like a rat out of a trap. I went through to Brisbane, and the bloke in Brisbane said, we'll give you an overcoat to become a reserve. I said, I don't want an overcoat. I don't want to become a reserve. He said, young fellow like you, why didn't you go to the war? And I said, I'd never crack on that I'd been to the war, and the medals that I had to send for, I never sent for them. And so Andy and I, me mate, we got some horses, and we were at 800 miles to Borroloola on a horse, just to forget about it all. And when we got to Borroloola, the blacks was having a tribal war themselves, and I thought, blimey, there's a man to leave the war overseas behind, and it's still on here. And I said to a bloke that was standing nearby, I said, they're all fighting with spears, and I don't see anybody getting wounded. And he said, I know, Bill. They got another way, you see. They got these umpires, and they jump in between, and they talk. They explain the whole thing to one another. And I said, blimey, that's like top-level talks. Here's what we call the primitive people doing what we should be doing. And that's right, Bill, he said. And one day we'll learn to talk things over, but until then, we're going to have to educate ourselves. I thought, well, I've already educated myself, and that's why for me I like to sit on the beaches out of Darwin, and I listen to the sea coming in, and we all go and catch a fish and get some crabs, and my mates all come around and we all talk, and everybody's happy. Thank you. And that was from a wonderful ABC feature in 1958, produced by a great ABC program maker called John Thompson. Hey, Bill, can you play us some cool jazz?
Sure. Cool.
Cool jazz.
How that hot?
Huh?
It's all right. That's avant-garde from Germany.
That's real cool. Bill Davis, ladies and gentlemen. Keep going cool. Thank you, Bill. If you go into the bush today, you're in for a big surprise. You go into the hills today, you'll never believe your eyes. For every tree that ever there was, and all the birds have flown, because me and me mates are having a lovely picnic. Mrs. Koala packed her lunch and then she said goodbye. All she took was a bunch of leaves, she's gone away to die. And in the trees where nobody sees, I have my fun, I do as I please. Today's the day me chainsaw's having its picnic. Start my engine, hear it roar. My little oily blade, it's doing a wonderful job today. Timber, yahoo, watch 'em fall. I will bring the bush to its knees today. Be yellow bulldozer, friend and I, we pile the logs up high, of work we never tire. And when the evening comes along, we have a couple of beers and build a 10-square-mile bonfire. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, someone in this country has got to do a bit of work. Yes, if you go into the bush today, you're in for a big surprise. You go into the hills today, you'll never believe your eyes. For every tree that ever there was, and all the roos have hopped, because today's the day the chippers are having their picnic. Wood chip time for mountain ash. The giant mountain ash is gone and left the bush today. How I love to see them crash. The trunks they mash and turn to pulp, 'cause it's good pay. Sold to men with many yen. Their lovely big ship comes and takes it overseas. And very soon we buy it back in imported boomerangs, 'cause they're very clever Japanese. Oh yes, if you go into the hills today, you're in for a big surprise. You go into the hills today, you'll never believe your eyes. For every tree that ever there was, and all the creeks are dry, because you and I are having a lovely picnic off your flaming greenies. I got to earn a living in this country too, you know. I got to send my kids to school with sandwiches on their feet, shoes in their lunch bag. Anyway, I don't know what else to do. I got to get a big one now. So I'll see you later. Thank you very much. I'd like to sing, of all of the old Australian bush songs, this one is, I got that right? I got it wrong. This one is my favourite, written by Henry Lawson, but I think it came like through the tradition. I think it feels to me like he picked up on a swaggy song and turned it into a really good poem. And somewhere along the way it found a tune, and it's called On the Wallaby. And I always fancied it came out of something like when in 1877 the papers reported that on the banks of the Lachlan River, they reported that 150 frowsy deadbeats and loony mad hatters met and formed a professional swagman's union. And they drew up a set of rules, and there was 10 rules. And rule number 1 was that no member was allowed to look for or accept work of any nature whatsoever. And rule number 5 was that no member was allowed to, was not allowed to be bitten by a savage sheep. If he does, he must immediately turn it into mutton. And so I always imagined when the heavy business was done around the campfires at night, there'd be a conversation going, and it would be the taciturn one who would wait for the pregnant pause in the conversation and see them stars up there? I can understand how them scientists know how far away they are. And I can understand how them scientists know how much they weigh, but I'm buggered if I know how they find out their names. Ten poles are rotten, campfires are dead. Yeah, you can go. That's all right. Give them a big hand, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for coming. Good night. Ten poles are rotten, campfires are dead. Possums they ramble in the trees overhead. I'm out on the wallaby, I'm humping my drum, and I've come by the tracks, sundown has come. And it's northwest and west, o'er the ranges and far, to the plains where cattle and sheep stations are, where the sky for me roof and the earth for my bunk, and a calico bag for my damper and junk. Scarcely a comrade my memory reveals, save a spiritless old dingo in tow of my heels. Sometimes I think of my honest old home, when the stars hang in clusters like lamps in the dome. Think of my hearth when the dark shadows fall, the campfire it's built on, the widest of all. I'm following fate, I know she knows best. I follow, she leads, and it's northwest, be west. But my tent is all torn, blankets are damp, fast rising floodwaters flow by the camp. Cold water rises in jets from the floor. Lie in my bunk and I listen to it roar. I think of tomorrow, how the footsteps will lag, as I tramp neath the weight of a rain-sodden swag. Swagman, it's mostly uphill. There are joys to be found on the wallaby still. When the day has gone by with its tramp and its toil, your campfire built, your billy you boil. There's comfort and peace in the bowl of your clay, or the yarn of a mate who is tramping your way. but beware of the city. It's poison for years. Beware of the dangers in drinking long beers. When the bushman gets bushed in the streets of a town, loses his mates when his check is knocked down. He's all right till his pockets are empty, and then he can waltz his old bluey up country again. Thank you. This is a travelling story. I was travelling through 1,000,000 miles of open country, thinking there was a roadhouse soon and it was going to be time to pull over for a refreshment. And just as I got towards the roadhouse, I was about to pull in and I noticed in the middle of the highway, on the white line, there, sitting a man in a cowboy hat, right on the white line, an old Aboriginal man. I pulled off just before I went into the roadhouse and I thought, he's going to get killed. And I went over and I said, "Hey mate, get off the road. You'll get killed." And he just looked up at me from under the cowboy hat and went, I said, "No, come on. You'll get killed. There's road trains on this road." And he looked at me again from under the cowboy hat and went, At which point, I heard from the veranda of the roadhouse a voice that said, "Leave him alone. He knows what he's doing. Get up here and have a drink." So I went up, sat on the veranda of the roadhouse, and I thought, okay, I'll settle in. A police car came along, up to the guy sitting in the middle of the road. The copper hops out and he went up to him, like I did, and said, "Get off there, old man, or you'll get killed. Get off there, or I'll arrest you." And he went to grab him, and as he gripped him by the shoulders, two more blokes from the mulga on here and another three from this side came out of the bush, and each of them had a frozen kangaroo tail in their hand. And they started beating the policeman around the head and shoulders with the frozen kangaroo tail. And he jumped back into his car and sped off, I presume to get reinforcements. I thought, I'm hanging about. Then the police car came back, but this time there was 3 coppers. However, by this stage, there was 3 men sitting on the white line. "Get off there, you blokes, or we're going to arrest you." And they went to grab them, and as they did, 5 more guys from this side and 3 more from here, all with a frozen kangaroo tail in their hand, came out and started bashing up these 3 policemen. And they hopped into their car and sped off again, I presume to go and get more reinforcements. Now, some of you here right now may not believe me. No? Some may not believe me. Well, for those of you that don't, courtesy of Darcy, down there on the sound, I would like to bring you the ABC report on the incident. But we're going to start with the man running the roadhouse, the publican, whose name was Gregory Dick.
There are some bruised and sore police officers today at the remote Tea Tree police station in the Northern Territory. Police at the town, about 160 kilometres north of Alice Springs, had to arrest several people after they'd taken to the officers with frozen kangaroo tails. The local roadhouse proprietor, Gregory Dick, saw the whole incident in Tea Tree yesterday afternoon. He'd sold the kangaroo tails to the locals only 15 minutes before they were allegedly used as offensive weapons. Gregory Dick is talking to Tony Walker in Darwin.
Did the kangaroo tails come from your shop?
Yes, we sold quite a stack of them here.
So you've always got them in stock, have you?
Always got plenty of them. Yes, so some of them weigh 2.5 to 3 kilos and they're frozen, so they're better than a nulla.
Had you ever considered them as an effective weapon?
Oh, I reckon they could be just about a lethal weapon now. After yesterday's incident, it was quite interesting.
Had you ever seen anybody use a kangaroo tail, a frozen kangaroo tail, as a weapon?
Never before. It was really good to see.
You saw the whole incident, did you?
Yeah, but there was 15, 20 odd people fighting at once there with it, and there was a crowd of about 50 odd all up.
Had these people bought their kangaroo tails earlier in the day, or when the fight started, did they rush into the shop and demand that you sell them to them over the counter then and there?
Only about 15 minutes before the fight, so they're still nice and frozen.
What do the kangaroo tails sell for?
Around about $5.80 a kilo, and most of them weigh about 2.5 to 3.25 kilos. So they are quite a solid, good old tail from the boomers from down south. Yeah.
Will you continue to sell them now that you're aware of the damage they can do?
Oh, yeah, I'll continue to sell them. Yeah, there's no worries there. Maybe it become an Olympic event later on.
Gregory Dick talking there with Tony Walker.
And it would be remiss to finish the tale without letting you hear from the policeman himself, Mr. Mark Coffey.
The officer in charge at Tea Tree, Senior Constable Mark Coffey, told Tony Walker how the incident began.
Yesterday afternoon we got a report of a person sitting on the Stewart Highway. We attended there and we tried to remove the person from the roadway. However, a struggle ensued and then a group of about 15 other persons came around us and started assaulting us with kangaroos' tails which were frozen. Subsequently, we arrested one person and another 2 police were sent up from Alice Springs, and during the evening we arrested another 5.
Now, where did they get these kangaroo tails that they assaulted you with?
From the Tea Tree Roadhouse.
They stock frozen kangaroo tails for sale for tucker and stuff.
That's correct.
Were they big kangaroo tails?
Standard ones for a normal sized kangaroo.
How long's a standard kangaroo tail?
Between 2 and 3 feet.
And they're frozen solid?
That's right.
And were you one of the officers hit with one of these?
Yes.
How does it feel to be whacked across the back with a frozen kangaroo tail?
Well, they're pretty hard, as you could imagine, being frozen. They're just like a solid piece of wood.
How do you feel today? A little bruised?
Yeah, I'm quite sore.
Must feel like you've run onto the football field or something.
Yes, about 4 times.
Now, you might find a degree of fame as a result of this story. I suspect that there might be a few paragraphs in just about every newspaper in the country tomorrow. How would you feel about that?
Well, it's probably not the sort of fame that I'd really want, but it's one of those things.
You'd had bigger dreams for yourself than being famous for being hit with a frozen kangaroo tail, eh?
Yes.
And a final question, Mark Coffey. What did you do with the evidence? What have you done with the kangaroo tails?
Well, most of the tails, by the time we got them, had either been eaten or they'd defrosted and they were about to get eaten.
So they're not sitting on the shelves in the Tea Tree police station?
No, they're certainly not.
You must be thankful for that at least.
Yes.
Senior Constable Mark Coffey.
And that's the story of the frozen kangaroo tails. Thank you very much. I'd like to invite Bill up again to play the piano and say once again many, many thanks to the friends of Araluen for putting on the show here today and for Anne for organising it all. Thank you very much. Darcy Davis is doing the sound. Thank you, Darcy. Andre's making the movie. Thanks to Ted for getting up and performing. Is there anybody I've missed? Anybody I've missed? That's it. And all of the other people doing the bar and the door on behalf of the Friends of Araluen. Thank you. This song's called The Singing Land. It was written by a Scotsman, Dougie MacLean. When I did a gig down home and Bruce Pascoe, the author, was there, he said to me afterwards, he said, that song is a hymn. And I also think that one day this song could hopefully become something of an anthem by Dougie MacLean. The burning sky is never ending across your Mulga plain, out where the dingo still is king, eternity remains. There between the old and ancient, there's no oasis bright. You gentle children who have gone, you're close to me tonight. In your singing land, your singing land, shine on, oh shine on over me. There's a feeling still and eerie, there's a feeling strong, the path humanity has come, and the path that we have gone. Me, I am just passing 80 years and 10. I'm just a stranger who may never come your way again. In your singing land, your singing land, shine on, oh shine on over me. caterpillar dreaming, new life shapes its form. Along the river's naked banks, they're straining for the storm. Sacred rock, infirm ocean, tree of man goes clear. The brolgas sing, the brolgas dance, and dawn is slipping near. In your singing land, your singing land, shine on, oh shine on over me. Sing with us. In your singing land, your singing land, shine on, oh shine on over me. In your singing land, your singing land, shine on, oh shine on over me. Thank you to Bill Davis, and especially all of you. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. See you after.
Thank you.